We're reading from First Chronicles chapter 19, verses 1 to 9. Now after this, Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, died, and his son reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal kindly with Hanun, the son of Nahash, for his father dealt kindly with me. So David sent messengers to console him concerning his father. And David's servants came to the land of the Ammonites, to Hanun, to console him. But the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun, Do you think because David has sent comforters to you that he is honoring your father? Have not his servants come to you to search and to overthrow and to spy out the land? So Hanun took David's servants and shaved them and cut off their garments in the middle at their hips and sent them away, and they departed. When David was told concerning the men, he sent messengers to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, Remain at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. When the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, Hanun and the Ammonites sent 1,000 talents of silver to hire chariots and horsemen from Mesopotamia, from Aram-Makkah, and from Soba. They hired 32,000 chariots and the king of Makkah with his army, who came and encamped before Medeba. And the Ammonites were mustered from their cities and came to battle. When David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the army of the mighty men. And the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the city, and the kings who had come were by themselves in the open country. David was known as a man after God's own heart, a title that reflected his understanding of God's will and his commitment to fulfill it in his lifetime. One example of this is seen in his dealings with the Ammonites. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 19, as the Israelites were preparing to enter the promised land, God commanded them, When you approach the territory of the people of Ammon, do not harass them or contend with them, for I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the sons of Lot for a possession. David, the most powerful king in the region at that time, respected this divine boundary. Unlike other rulers who sought to expand their kingdoms indiscriminately, David's ambitions were aligned with God's directives. This attitude sharply contrasts with the tendency of worldly rulers, both ancient and modern, to expand their dominion through conquest and colonization. Power breeds greed, but David's devotion to God's will kept him in a place of safety and blessing. He recognized the dangers of stepping outside God's will. He understood that true success lies in obedience rather than territorial conquest. This perspective reminds us that staying within God's boundaries is wise and ensures that we live in peace. David's respect for these boundaries is evident in his interaction with Hanun, the king of the Ammonites. When Nahash, Hanun's father, who was once kind to David, passed away, David sent a delegation to express his condolences. This was a sincere and kind gesture, intended to show compassion and build goodwill between their nations. However, it was met with suspicion and hostility. The princes of Ammon, mistrusting David's intentions, accused his envoys of being spies. Acting on this assumption, they severely insulted and humiliated David's ambassadors by shaving off half their beards and cutting their garments in half. This incident highlights the truth, as we read in Proverbs 27:19. As in water, face reflects face, so the heart of man reflects the man. The Ammonite leaders projected their own deceitful hearts onto David. They assumed his motives were crooked, since that is how they would have acted in a similar situation. Their mistrust and suspicion arose from the corruption in their own hearts rather than any wrongdoing on David's part. Our inner thoughts and inclinations shape our perception of others. When our hearts are insecure and fearful, we struggle to see goodness and sincerity in others, seeing the worst in everyone. The consequences of the Ammonites' actions altered their fate. Realizing they had provoked a powerful adversary, the Ammonites hired mercenaries from neighboring nations, including the Syrians, to bolster their defenses. But their combined forces were no match for David's army. In the ensuing battles, the Ammonites and their allies were utterly defeated. The Syrians were devastated and suffered huge casualties. What began in unjustified suspicion and hostility spiraled into a catastrophic defeat. Amid these events, we see leadership and faith in Joab, the commander of David's army. Facing a formidable enemy on two fronts, Joab rallied his troops with these words. In verse 13, be strong and let us use our strength for our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what seems good to him. As God's people, we know that the outcome of any battle is with God. Yet, we are called to act bravely and valiantly. It is essential in our spiritual battles to strike this balance between faith in God and doing what we can. As Paul reminds us in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10 and 11, we are to be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might, putting on the full armor of God to stand against the schemes of the enemy. The battle belongs to the Lord, but we are called to fight. Our weapons are knowing and believing the truth and living it out in our lives through faith, demonstrating the righteousness, mercy, and fairness of God in our mundane dealings with others. The episodes underscores the destructive power of a corrupted heart. Driven by their own deceitful nature, the Ammonites failed to appreciate David's sincerity. This led to an attitude of hostility, bringing ruin on ourselves. Proverbs 4:23 enjoins us, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. Our hearts are the wellspring of our thoughts, actions, and perceptions. If we fail to guard it against unbelief in the form of doubts, fears, and sinful inclinations, we will have a distorted view of the world and fall into many unnecessary snares and troubles. In our own daily lives, when suspicion and mistrust dominate our thoughts, we will be unfriendly towards others and create conflict rather than peace with others. Instead of kindness and sincerity, we will see only the worst in others. This is not our calling. As the Spirit describes it in 1 Corinthians 13:7, we have received and must reflect the love that bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Without being either naive or ignorant, we can have open, loving hearts to others, approaching them with unquenchable trust and persevering optimism. Of course, living with this kind of openness leaves us vulnerable. But as the Spirit reminds us in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 13 and 14, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. This peace in suffering reflects a heart of trust. Our refuge is not in self-defensive suspicion and fear, but in God's sovereign protection and justice. It is better to suffer wrong, but keep our hearts pure than give the enemy a foothold to create hate and fear. When we allow insecurity and mistrust to take root, poor decisions are the outcome. These have far-reaching consequences. Psalms 53:5 vividly describes the plight of those who live in fear without seeking God. There they are, in great terror, where there is no terror. When we rest in the knowledge that God is our shield and our exceeding great reward, we are free to love others with confidence and peace. We do not depend on them for our vindication, but on God, the judge of all motives and actions. Ultimately, the story of David's interaction with the Ammonites challenges us to examine our own perceptions and reactions. Let us strive to keep our hearts free from corruption, allowing the love of Christ to be our example and our power. Let it shape our thoughts and actions, and let us trust God to protect and guide us as we seek to do good regardless of how others respond. Do we struggle with fear or suspicion in our relationships? Let us ask God to reveal the truth about our hearts. If so, let us purify our hearts and renew our trust in Him. Let love and openness dominate our thinking, even when it is challenging. Proverbs 3:5-6 encourages us. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. Trust Him, knowing that He is faithful and just. God bless.